Great news! We've got even more waifu cards. And with Valentine's on the horizon, this is probably the way for Bushiroad to tell the ladies what to get for their significant other, as apparently waifus always sells.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we've got some new promos to talk about as Bushiroad announced a new special promotional pack which probably has to do with Valentine's Day coming up in Japan. And basically what this new promo pack will hold are a couple of new pretty interesting promo cards which all correspond with either waifu archetypes or female-centric clans. So you can already guess which clans are going to get a new promo card. So let's talk about and dive straight into these cards, as some of them are quite interesting, and honestly I hope that they will get an English release. Not everyone, but some. And we start off with a bang because we've got yet again another witch promo card for Oracle Think Tank, as this time we got also yet another grade 2, which is Kobold Witch Poo-Poo. And for anybody that isn't aware, previously when we talked about promo cards, Witches for Oracle Think Tank got a promo grade 2, which basically could put itself into the soul, and when it's in the soul, it counts as a grade 3. So you could soul blast it for all your grade 3 soul blast skills, like Scarlet Witch Coco. So it made the whole archetype a turn faster, because you first needed to write Coco, then write Coco on top of Coco, so you could soul blast the grade 3, and then write, I believe, in Zozo, which basically could turn all those protect markers you could create with Coco into actual valid power. But the issue is that game mechanic, or that game strategy, was grade 3 turns, which is a turn 5 play, which is hella slow. But thanks to that grade 2 promo, that was sped up a turn, so it became a turn 4 play, but that's still too slow. But now thanks to this grade 2 promo, that's sped up even faster, because now you can do the whole shenanigan play, your power strategy, on the very first grade 3 turn that you write Scarlet Witch Coco, and don't have to rely on Zozo, if I have the name correct of the other grade 2, of the other grade 3. If it's another name, I'm sorry. So let's clarify what I'm talking about by analyzing the skills, because she has a skill on a Vanguard circle. When rode from a grade 1, discard a card from your hand and get an imaginary gift Protect. This is quite interesting, as it allows you to gain a protect marker early on, but in a generic sense, this doesn't really mean a lot, because it's just a protect marker. You switch a card from your hand into a protect marker. It's somewhat similar to what Coco does, only on one card. However, there is a big significant upside to this skill, and it's the fact if you went second, you still get that protect marker a turn earlier. Thus, if you're up against a force deck, or a deck that heavily relies on a specific Vanguard swing or a unit swing with high power, you at least get the protect marker even if you went second, thus upping the consistency of your defense capabilities and increasing the chance of actually you getting to your grade 3 turn. However, it relies heavily on you writing this grade 2, so it's kind of iffy, but it's at least a interesting thing. But the main gimmick and the main potential of this card actually lies in her secondary skill, and that also comes into play why I just discussed this whole engine for Scarlet Witch Coco, because her second skill is Auto Rigard Circle. When it attacks, cost, your hand has one or more sentinels and reveal any number of them. And this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of the battle for each card revealed for this cost. So effectively, when it attacks, you can reveal any sentinels, thus protect markers or actual PGs, or your sentinel crits, can then give this card a power increase of 5k power for every sentinel you revealed during the attack. Now, this synergizes with her Vanguard Circle skill, so if you write her and you call one to the Vanguard Circle, you can attack and you can at least give 5k power, maybe more if you have a normal sentinel in your hand, which is neat. But the interesting aspect is if we combine this with the other grade 2 promo and Scarlet Witch Coco. Because if we write the other grade 2, and we then write Coco on top of her, we can Soul Blast that grade 2 that now counts as a grade 3 and turn any witch card in her hand into a Sentinel Protect marker. And then if we have this grade 2 onto the field, or we just call it from our hand, we can then swing with them, and then we can reveal all those Sentinels from our hand and give this grade 2 a X amount of power increase, which can easily be 20, 30, 40k power. So you can start swinging with high numbers out of the get-go, while also having all these protect markers in your hand. Thus you can potentially protect yourself against a lot of matchups that don't really heavily rely on multi-attacks and mainly on strong beating columns, like Shadow Paladin for example. Which is actually pretty neat, because this basically means that the whole Witches mechanic, their playstyle, is now a turn-free strategy instead of the old usual turn 5 play, which heavily relied on you riding 3 grade 3s in a specific order. Now the only thing you need is that grade 2 in Soul, which also you don't have to ride it, you can just call to the Regular Circle and it shoves itself into the Soul with her act ability, and we only need to rely on riding Scarlet Witch Coco and having Poo Poo in our hand. So overall, I don't think this will make the deck a tier 1 meta deck, but definitely a tier 2, which is the reason why I hope these 2 specific grade 2 promos will come to English, which makes the Witch archetype a whole lot of more fun to play, and actually looks like a really solid engine once again. So yeah, hope to that we get these cards. Now, for a lot faster, because the next couple of promo cards are not as in-depth as the Witch card for Oracle Think Tank, and the next card that is the one for Angel Feathers, which is this grade 1 Cure Basket Angel. And its abilities are on Vanguard Circle, when placed, cost discard a card from your hand and draw a card. Very simple, we've seen this time and time again, which is completely fine. But then it also has the skill, Auto Vanguard Circle, at the beginning of your opponent's battle phase, cost, put this unit into your soul, choose 2 of your grade 1 or greater rear guards until the end of turn, they get intercept and can intercept from the back row. Now, it is nice that this card gives your units intercept and intercept from the back row, thus allowing you to utilize your grade 1s and grade 2s that are in the back row that could potentially boost, and it allows you to gain more value off your Protect 2 markers if you place them in the back. However, I don't see the use of this card, because the only useful grade 1 that could benefit from this was the grade 1 that interact with Protect 2 markers, but that specific grade 1 already could intercept from the back row if you had the Protect marker in the same column, thus nullifying the use of this card. Even with the new Malk of Malak card and the support engine around it, I don't see the beneficial effect of this card in your arsenal, as you won't get a lot of value out of it that you can already generate with other cards. And also on top of that, this card has the issue that you need to wait until your opponent begins their battle phase. Thus, if you're up against a control deck that can just snipe something in the main phase, they are gonna target this grade 1 probably every single time when this card is on the field. So that's why I'm not really a fan of this grade 1, and I probably don't see the need of this card actually being a thing. So give us the OTT one and keep this one. Now another promo that we got is for Neo Nectar in the likes of Maiden of Irradiate. And Irradiate has the abilities on a Vanguard Circle. Your token unit in the same column as this unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card abilities. So protection to your tokens, which is neat. But it also has the ability act on Vanguard Circle, cost, counter+1, and rest this unit. Call up the 2 plant tokens to the Vanguard Circle, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, one of your Vanguards gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. Now this can be nice for any Neo Nectar deck, you could say per se, but in the Asha deck, this is actually incredible, because this card was made for that playstyle. Because yes, resting this unit might be annoying for any other deck because you lose the booster, but for Asha this doesn't matter because you cannot boost the Asha token in the first place. But on top of that, this card creates 2 plant tokens, which is exactly the amount of cards you need to retire to create the plant token with Dream Spinning Asha in the first place. Then potentially giving your Vanguard an extra 10k power will then also be transferred to the token, thus generating even more value out of this skill. But the more important aspect about this card is its first ability, granting protection to your plant token, in this case the Flower Fairy token, thus securing the biggest flaw of the Asha deck, which is basically that the token itself is the biggest bullseye market for any deck out there, because that token is a lot of investment for the Asha player, and if your opponent can just snipe it with any generic retire skill, that means they effectively get triple the value or double the value depending on how many units you had to sacrifice to put into that token. So having a way to protect that card is actually really, really important, and it being a booster that needs to rest itself is great, because you couldn't boost the thing anyways. So this is actually a perfect grade 1 for the Asha deck. Now, it isn't super amazing, which will skyrocket the deck into the new stratosphere, because there is still an apparent flaw within this card, and that's the fact that, yes, this card gives protection to the token, but it doesn't give protection to itself. So if you're up against a deck that has indiscriminate removal, that's one thing that will just retire the token because this just prevents it from targeted stuff. But if your opponent has access to 2 retires, then for the first one, they retire this Grid 1. And then for the second one, they're just gonna retire the token because it's no longer protected. So it's not a completely fail-safe fix, but at least it's something that makes it a bit tougher for your opponent to deal with your board like you would otherwise if you didn't have access to this Grade 1. So overall, I think it's a nice promo. If you're an Asha player or an Asha main, then I definitely see you wanting this promo. Will it revolutionize Neonectar, and this is a must-need to get in the English format? Not really, because most retired decks already have access to indiscriminate removal, or at least multiple pinpoint removals, thus nullifying that protection aspect of this card. It's mainly probably there for the actability that gives more power oomph to that one specific place, but not something that Neonectar already has access to. So, nice addition, but don't need it. Now, another very odd promo card is this Grid 1 for Shadow Paladin, Knight of Blinking / Grite. And this is yet another main target because, as you can see, it's a 5k base power. But this is something quite interesting and also something we have seen before in a different way. Because her first ability is Autumn Rearguard Circle. When your Rearguard is retired during the battle phase, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So this can be a beefy girl that can boost for high numbers or attack for high numbers in the right circumstances and with specific builds. But that specific build becomes a lot more apparent when we take a look at her second ability, which is Autumn Rearguard Circle. At the end of the battle, it boosts a Vanguard with Blaster in its card name. If your opponent called a Sentinel to the Guardian Circle during the battle, cost Counterblast 1 and deal 1 damage to your opponent's Vanguard. So this basically is a support card for the Blaster archetype, thus Phantom Blaster Overlord. You could say Gust Blaster Dragon because it also retires your stuff, but nobody's actually playing that card anymore, and you're probably better off by just playing Overlord, so this is an Overlord support card. And it boosting an Overlord can actually be quite good because Overlord is already a 23k base in most circumstances with a double critical, and if you just retire 2 units, then you have another 20k power on top of that, which is 43k with double critical, which is actually pretty decent. In most cases will force your opponent to perfect guard or hard guard over it if this is the card that's boosting it, because your opponent doesn't want to give you that damage. Now, is this skill actually going to come up all that often? Not as often as you think, because you can effectively see this skill as a Sentinel restrict on your Phantom Blaster Overlord. Your opponent will never perfect guard the attack if they're at 5 damage, thus this skill is the same value of having the Sentinel restrict printed on it. But this is actually worse than having the Sentinel restrict on the card, because if you don't have any Counterblast open, then this effect does nothing, meaning you lose the Sentinel restrict in the first place. But in another circumstance, if your opponent is at 4, and you swing with a double crit Vanguard attack, they probably would rather take that 1 damage instead of the potential 2 or more if you rip even more crits on top of that. So this is effectively worse than a Sentinel restrict because this is a specific guard restrict that your opponent has control over what type of value you were going to get out this skill, which is never a good thing. And this card reminds me of another grade 2, which was also in the main target, which is called Demne, Knight of something something Demne, which had the skill that if you attacked and your opponent didn't guard that attack, you could counterblast 1 and shoot them a damage. So for some reason, Shadow Paladin gets all these counterblast 1 shoot at damage if your opponent met a certain requirement while guarding, which I don't know why that's a gimmick for Shadow Paladin, but apparently that's it. But in the past, I rated that card pretty highly because you force always guard from your opponent and in some circumstances could maybe shoot at damage. But in hindsight, that was way too optimistic about the card, and the card is pretty bad and there's no real reason to actually play the card. And I feel the same way about this grade 1. Was it not for the fact that this is actually a pretty good, decent booster or beater in the right circumstances, because that first skill probably carries this card way more than the second skill. But in most circumstances, that second skill can be read as a Sentinel restriction on top of the boosted attack that is probably your Vanguard, which is pretty neat. So that makes Phantom Blaster Overlord a lot better. I think this is a really nice addition to the deck. Is it needed? Not really, but if we get it, I think Phantom Blaster Overlord players are pretty happy with that extra addition. As, yeah, it's a boost to the playstyle, but that's only a boost if you play the main. And the question is, do you have the money for the main? That's something only you can answer. Now, another card that I really like is another grade 1, which is Stealth Rogue of Invasion Re, and this has the effect on a Vanguard circle. When placed, costs Soul Blast 1, your opponent choose a card from his or her hand and discard it. If your opponent's hand has 5 or less cards, your opponent draws a card. I think I didn't specify this, but this is a Nubatama card, and you probably already guessed it with the discard thing because that's a Nubatama playstyle, not a Murakumo thing. So, we got more discard, but honestly, this effect is something that I really like because it allows you, in some circumstances, to fill the drop zone if you want to play this as a support card for the Shiranui dominant playstyle, but you can also maybe go into the more complete hand disruption playstyle where you use this if your opponent has a bigger hand size. Because if your opponent has 7 cards or more, this is a direct minus to your hand. If they have 6, that's not the case because they drop the card, then you look at their hand size, it's 5 or less, and then they draw a card and they're back up to 6. So if you want to minus them on hand size, you use this when they have 7 or more cards in hand. And 7 or more cards in hand is actually not as unlikely as you think, especially nowadays in Standard and even in Premium, because big hand size are king. So if you can use this in the right circumstances, you can actually start disrupting their hand quite effectively. And if you combine this with the bounce mechanic of Nubatama, especially with Hanzo, and especially seeing that we're going to get a new Hanzo, you can use this, slam it down, Soul Blast 1, discard them a card, then bounce it back with Hanzo, slam it down, Soul Blast 1, and then force them to discard a card again. So if they're at 8 cards in hand, you push them back to 6, and then you start attacking, which is a nice addition to the playstyle, and it is quite flexible. But on top of that, it also has a secondary effect, which is auto, when rode upon, costs Soul Blast 1. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 2 or greater, your opponent chooses a card from his or her hand and discard it. If it's grade 1 or less, you draw a card. Now this is quite interesting because this effect changes depending if you went first or if you went second. If you went first, that means your opponent is a grade 1 or less the moment you right on top of this, meaning you draw a card. So you already went first and you accelerate your draw advantage, which is probably a better outcome because if you already are at first, that means you will get to grade 3 first, so you want to get to your pieces and you just want to push them to the end game. Then force the discard probably won't do as much in the early stages of the game, so the draw is way more beneficial in that stage. But if you went second, that means your opponent is at the higher grade, and then you force them to discard. Now this is pretty nice, because that basically means that you get her rearguard circle skill without them actually drawing a card. And in the early game, that means they are probably at around the 6 cards in hand, so you just force them to discard a card, no matter the hand size, and you punish them even more if they just rushed you on the grade 2 turn. And depending on which deck you're facing them, they probably want to rush, but if they see this grade 1, them slamming down multiple cards early on might not be as beneficial to them, because if you just ride up to that, you can punish them on the crackback with the extra discards and potential bouncing and discard on top of that, which can disrupt their entire play or the strategy they had in mind for their grade 3 turns and onwards. So this is a very interesting grade 1, which I definitely see the potential in depending on what type of playstyle you have. It has potential in Shiranui with just filling up the drop zone, but I also can see this with a more hand disruption playstyle that we saw with Gemio Kongo, or maybe with Hanzo, depending on what the new Hanzo is going to do. So, depending on what support we're going to get, I honestly hope we're going to get this grade 1, because I like this type of card. And I really do want to experiment with this card's potential. Now, as a final promo to this promo pack, we have a Pale Moon card, which is Aesthetic Baton Twirler. And her abilities are continuous Vanguard to Vanguard Circle. During a turn, if you called 1 or more cards from your soul this turn, this unit gets power plus 5k. So it's a 14k beater, nothing really fancy, it's alright. And then for secondary skill, we have Auto Vanguard to Vanguard Circle. When placed from hand, draw a card, and put a card from your hand into the soul. So it's another way to set up your soul. It's super generic in that sense, which is nice. But again, it's not really something new, and we've seen this time and time again. And I don't really think it's necessary at all. And probably we have cards that can do things way better in archetype, in playstyle, what we've already seen. So yeah, this is a fine promo. I don't have really any opinion about this. Now, those were the cards that were in a specific promo pack, which has probably, in my opinion, to do with Valentine's Day. But we also saw a brand new promo not too long after, which is this new Mega Colony card. And yes, I know what you're thinking. At the beginning of the video, I talked about waifu cards. But then I want to ask your question with my question, and that is, did you just assume it's gender? You don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. That could be anything. And if you want to question anybody's insanity about making that thing a waifu, then you don't know the power of the internet. Like, people manage to waifufy a crappy internet browser. And if that's possible, then this is possible. So don't judge people on that, because I'm not judging you, okay? Okay, so with that out of the way, this is Machining Black Saturn. And its abilities are act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost counter +1 and soul +1, choose 5 of your rear guards, stand them, and until the end of turn, they get power plus 5k, and this unit gets drive +1. Choose one of your opponent's Vanguard, and that unit gets drive -1 until the end of his or her next turn. I don't really have a lot to say about this card. It basically is a different Spark Hercules, because it stands your units, it gives 5k power to them, but instead of minusing your opponent's 5k power, it gives them minus drive 1, but that means if they just ride on top of their Vanguard, this absolutely does nothing. So it's very situational if you're up against a deck that cannot rewrite or doesn't rely on rewriting all that much. And yeah, it's basically a different Spark Hercules that might be a bit cheaper because it's not 2 counter +2, but Spark Hercules is a 3-year-old VR, so yeah, this is a promo which I like to see, because this is a card that we don't care if we ever get it, because I don't see this benefit any Mega Colony player out there, and I know that I probably pissed off one Mega Colony player because he saw the potential in this card for the Machining archetype, which I definitely overlooked, but honestly, I do not really care about this one. So yeah, Japan, you may keep this one. You definitely may waifufy this thing, because probably nobody really cares about this. And that basically also concludes this video. And holy crap, I just looked at the recording and this video is way longer than I originally anticipated. So yeah, with that said, let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. We got a couple of interesting promos. In my opinion, the Oracle Think Tank one is probably the best among them, because it really fleshes out the playstyle of the Witches archetype within Oracle Think Tank. And then besides that, we've got the new Batama one, which I really like in the way that it could potentially play, but at the same time, it could also do absolutely nothing. And besides that, then we have the Ashak promo that could help the archetype, but also is kind of iffy. And the rest of the promo cards, yeah, they're there. So these are promo cards which I really honestly like to see in a generic sense, because I don't really mind them if we don't get them in the West, except for the Witches one. I really like that we get those 2 specific grade 2 Witches cards, because they really make the deck playable in today's current environment. And it actually makes the deck a lot more fun, because it's also way more consistent than it originally was straight out the set of VBTO 3, I believe, the Miyagi Academy set. So yeah, let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Deep, and I see you guys in the next one.